Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a massive stack of research on the desk today, and honestly, the timing couldn't be more critical.
It really couldn't.
We are jumping straight into a seismic shift in geopolitics that just hit the wires, just now in January 2026? If you've been following the news, you already know the headline.
You can't miss it.
The European Union has officially, finally, placed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, on its terrorist list.
It is the other shoe finally dropping. I mean, for years, analysts called this the nuclear option of diplomacy, no pun intended. And Brussels just, hesitated.
They did. But now, it seems that red line has been crossed.
It's been obliterated.
Exactly. And look, the news cycle right now is just flooded with the immediate fallout. You're seeing ambassadors getting summoned, threats being traded back and forth.
Standard procedure for something this big.
But that is not why we are here. We're going to bypass the breaking news ticker and go much, much deeper. We are basing today's deep dive on a really fascinating granular analysis of an interview between a host and a political analyst named Mr. Abedini.
And what I love about this particular source material is that it doesn't just stop at the politics. It connects this EU decision directly to the aftermath of what he calls the uprising of 1404.
That's the Persian calendar year that started back in March of 2025.
Right. And it treats the politics, the psychology, and the street-level violence as one single interconnected story. It's not three different things.
It really is a heavy analysis. We're going to be unpacking some pretty intense concepts today. Things like psychological warfare, a phenomenon the source calls invisible slaughter.
Which is a chilling phrase.
It is, and a critique of the Iranian opposition that is, quite frankly, blistering. It completely challenges the narrative of who the good guys are supposed to be.
Yeah, it's definitely not a simple heroes versus villains story. It's much, much messier.
So let's start at the top. The EU decision. Why does our source, Mr. Abedini, view this as such a pivotal turning point? I mean, the U.S. listed the IRGC years ago. Canada did it too.
Right.
So why is the EU joining the party now the game changer?
It comes down to the anatomy of the regime. The source uses this really effective metaphor. If you look at the Islamic Republic as like a biological body, previous sanctions, even the American ones, they were like handcuffing the wrists or maybe injuring a limb. They restricted movement, sure. But Abedini argues that the IRGC isn't just an arm of the state.
It's more than that.
It is the spine.
The central nervous system.
Precisely. It holds the entire structure upright.
Yeah.
You have to remember, and then the analysis really drills this home, the IRGC isn't just a military force with guns.
No, it's a business empire.
A massive industrial conglomerate. They run construction, telecommunications, oil smuggling, ports. I mean, they are essentially a mafia with a navy.
So by designating them as terrorists, the EU isn't just making a political statement.
No, not at all. They are targeting the central nervous system of the regime's economic survival.
So it basically toxifies the entire system. Because if the IRGC is the spine of the economy and the EU says you can't touch the IRGC,
then suddenly European businesses, banks, insurers, they can't touch anything without risking this massive legal radioactive fallout.
It makes business as usual impossible.
Legally impossible.
Yeah.
And the source ties this decision directly to the violence we saw during the 1404 uprising. The argument is that the world finally saw the IRGC for what it is because the mask came off completely.
And the analysis uses a very specific, chilling phrase to describe the regime's crackdown during that year.
Organized slaughter.
I circled that phrase in those. Organized slaughter. It hits you in the gut.
Yes.
But it also implies something specific, right? It implies intent.
Yes.
This wasn't just riot police panicking in a chaotic situation.
No, the source is adamant about this. This was a structural decision. The regime looked at the scale of the uprising in 1404 and realized they had, well, zero political capital left.
The well was dry.
Completely. No one was buying the reform narrative anymore. The good cop, bad cop routine was over, so they made a calculated choice.
Which was?
To preserve the system at any cost.
Which leads us to that fascinating theoretical concept the expert introduces, the survival trap. I found this really insightful because usually when we see a dictatorship crackdown, we think, well, they're doing that to survive.
Right. A logical move.
But this analysis argues that the crackdown is the trap.
It's a paradox of power. Think of it this way. The regime reached a fork in the road. Option A was to compromise, listen to the streets, maybe allow some freedom,
which they see as weakness,
as the start of their collapse. So they were left with option B, kill. kill everyone in the street to survive the immediate threat to win the Tuesday afternoon, so to speak.
But by winning the Tuesday afternoon, they lost the decade.
Precisely. The source calls it a structural error. By using heavy weapons, military-grade violence against their own cities, they might have bought a few months of silence.
But they torched their own legitimacy.
Completely destroyed it. And this is crucial. The source points out they lost the gray layers of society.
Who are the gray layers?
These are the people who aren't necessarily activists. The shopkeepers, the conservative families, the people who just want stability and usually keep their heads down.
Right.
When the state becomes the primary source of chaos and death, those people get pushed into the opposition.
You can't unsee a massacre. Once the government is the one doing the killing, the whole stability argument just goes out the window.
Exactly. The regime bought time, but they ensured that the eventual collapse will be total. There is no path back to managing the crisis because they've burned that bridge.
They're an occupation force in their own country.
That's what it comes down to.
And that reality creates a very specific, heavy psychological environment. This brings us to the concept of invisible slaughter.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit, when I first read that term, I was confused. We all saw the videos on social media. We saw the names. It wasn't hidden in some dungeon. How is it invisible?
It's about psychological invisibility. It's not invisible to the eye. It's invisible to the conscience of the world.
Okay, unpack that.
The analyst argues that the sheer volume of violence, combined with the lack of any meaningful international intervention, it just turns the killing into background noise.
It's the doom-scrolling effect. You see a video of a tragedy in Tehran, you feel a pang of horror, and then you swipe up and you see a cat video.
Or a cooking recipe, exactly. It ceases to be an event that demands a response, and it becomes just content.
And that is devastating for the people on the ground.
It creates what the source describes as a state of suspended grief. Imagine losing your brother or your daughter in the streets. You scream for the world to help. The UN issues a strongly worded statement.
And the news cycle moves on.
And you are left alone with that loss, with no justice.
It almost validates the killer, doesn't it? It tells the victim, your life didn't matter enough to stop the person who took it.
That is the danger point. The source warns, and this is a key insight from the deep dive, that this feeling of abandonment doesn't just result in sadness.
It turns into anger?
It metabolizes into radicalized anger. It destroys trust not just in the local government, but in, global concepts.
What do you mean by global concepts? Human rights?
Human rights, international law. If you are a teenager in Iran watching your friends die while the West talks about human rights, but keeps, dragging its feet on sanctions, you stop believing in human rights.
You start believing in power.
You start thinking the only thing that matters is raw power. The only way to survive is to be more ruthless than them.
Which is a recipe for future extremism. We're essentially baking instability into the next generation by ignoring the trauma of this one.
It creates a nihilism that is very, very hard to fix later on. The source is warning that invisible slaughter breeds a visible monster down the road.
So we have a regime caught in a survival trap, burning its own house down to stay in charge. We have a population suffering from this deep, suspended grief.
And a sense of global abandonment.
Now, usually in a story like this is the moment where the opposition steps in. The government in waiting, the knights in shining armor.
Theoretically, yes. That is how the script usually goes.
But the source material takes a massive, and I'd say controversial, pivot here. It doesn't pat the opposition on the back. It basically dissects them.
It really does.
And specifically, it zooms in on the faction led by Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah.
It is a scathing critique. And we need to be very clear here. We are reporting the analysis provided by Mr. Abedini in the source. He identifies what he calls the Pahlavi ecosystem.
Ecosystem, that's an interesting word. Not just the man, but the whole bubble around him.
Exactly. The advisors, the media channels, the loud voices online. And the critique starts with strategy. For a long time, the Pahlavi strategy seemed to hinge on a very specific hope.
Which was?
That the IRGC and the Basij, the paramilitary forces, would eventually defect. That they would switch sides and facilitate a controlled transition.
And that brings us right back to the EU decision we started with.
Connect the dots. If your entire strategy relies on the IRGC will help us, and then the EU designates the IRGC as a terrorist organization,
officially labeling them as the toxic spine of the problem,
your strategy just hit a brick wall. You can't claim to be the democratic alternative while banking on the terrorist spine of the current dictatorship to hand you the keys to the palace.
It's a complete contradiction. You can't ride the monster to freedom. But the source goes deeper than just bad strategy. It attacks the mindset.
The whole mindset.
The analyst actually uses the F word, fascism.
He does. And in political science, that's a heavy charge. He's not using it as like a generic insult you see on Twitter. He's describing a specific set of behaviors.
What behaviors? What's the evidence he cites?
He points to their targets. The source argues that this faction spends an inordinate amount of energy attacking other opposition groups.
Not the regime.
Well, yes, the regime too, but also leftists, Republicans, the MEK, ethnic minorities, often with more ferocity than they attack the mullahs.
And there were specific incidents mentioned to ground this, right?
Yes. The analysis cites an incident involving a truck driver during the protests. He had a slogan on his vehicle, "No Shah, no Sheikh."
Meaning neither the monarchy nor the clerics.
Exactly. And the source reports he was physically attacked by monarchist supporters. There was another televised incident where a Pahlavi supporter told a Turkish-American activist to shut up and threaten them.
It's the purity politics thing. If you are not with us 100%, you are the enemy.
Which is a hallmark of that kind of thinking. It defines the world as a binary us versus them. There's no room for plurality, no room for debate.
And the source makes a really interesting psychological observation about the people who hold these views.
It's fascinating. Many of them live in the West, Los Angeles, London, Paris. They have iPhones, they wear modern clothes, they live in democracies.
But their operating system is feudal.
That's the implication. The analyst argues they're terrified of the chaos of revolution. They don't actually want the hard work of democracy.
The committees, the compromises, the uncertainty.
No. They want a savior. They want a father figure to come in, sweep away the mullahs, and restore order.
It's an anxiety response. Democracy is scary. A king is safe. A king tells you what to do.
Exactly. It alleviates the burden of responsibility. And this gets even weirder when the source brings up the religious element.
Right.
I honestly didn't see this coming.
The Christian convert angle.
Yes. The source claims that within the diaspora, there's a segment, including new Christian converts, who are framing Reza Pahlavi using almost messianic language. They call him God's choice.
Which is incredibly ironic.
How so?
Isn't that exactly what the current supreme leader claims?
Yeah.
That he is God's representative on earth.
And it's what the Shahs claimed before him, the shadow of God. The source argues that if you just swap the imam for the king, but you keep the logic that this person is chosen by the divine and cannot be questioned.
You haven't moved an inch? You're just recycling the dictatorship with a different aesthetic?
You're changing the drapes, but the house is still a prison? The source argues these hardline monarchists end up acting as the regime's Persian-speaking proxy forces abroad.
How?
Because their intolerance creates chaos and division in the opposition, which is exactly what the regime needs to survive. If the opposition is fighting itself, it's not fighting the regime.
That is bleak. So is there any good news in this analysis?
Huh?
Or is the uprising of 1404 just a tragedy?
Surprisingly, the source is actually optimistic about the long game. The argument is that despite the slaughter and the infighting, the uprising achieved things that are irreversible.
Like what? Because from the outside, it looks like the regime is still there.
First, the myth of stability. For 40 years, the world and many Iranians bought into the idea that the Islamic Republic was unshakable. Too big, too scary, too rich to fall.
That illusion is shattered.
Gone. The regime is now seen as dead on its feet, just holding on by the barrel of a gun.
The emperor has no clothes. He just has a lot of bullets.
Right. And second is the transformation of fear. The source talks about learned helplessness, that feeling that resistance is futile. That has broken.
People are still scared, though.
Of course. People are terrified of dying. That's natural. But the fear is no longer paralyzing. It doesn't stop the action. The psychological barrier is gone.
And what about the political maturity? The source made a big deal about that slogan again.
No Shah, no Sheikh. The analyst sees this not just as a chant, but as a sign of deep political evolution. It shows that a massive chunk of the population, perhaps the silent majority inside Iran, has moved past the savior complex.
They aren't looking to trade one dictator for another.
They want to try. Themselves. They want the rule of law, not the rule of a strong man. They are rejecting the past and the present to build a future.
And they are taking control of the narrative.
That's a huge point. In the past, the victor wrote the history. If the regime killed you, they erased you. But now, the victims and their families are documenting history in real time. They're keeping the receipts.
The mothers of Layla Park, the families posting videos, the names being read out.
The regime has lost its monopoly on the truth. It's crowdsourced history. And you can't sweep invisible slaughter under the rug if millions of people are holding the evidence.
So if we pull back and look at the whole picture the source is painting, we are in a transition period. The old world is dying, but the new world hasn't been born yet.
And that gap, that is the most dangerous time. That is where the monsters live. That is where the slaughter happens.
It really brings it back to us, doesn't it, the listeners, the observers? We started by talking about the EU decision, a political act, but the source ends on a moral question.
About invisible slaughter. It asks us to check our own desensitization. We live in an age of information overload. We see everything. But do we feel anything?
If we scroll past the video of a crackdown because it's just another one, are we part of the problem?
The source suggests yes. If we view the slaughter of civilians as background noise or just content to be consumed, we contribute to the longevity of the dictatorship.
Dictators count on our attention span being shorter than their ammunition supply.
They rely on the world getting bored. That's a heavy thought to leave on. The idea that our attention, or lack of it, is actually a geopolitical force.
The survival trap isn't just for the regime, it's a trap for the world. If we accept their violence as normal, we're trapped in that cycle with them.
Well said.
Well, that is certainly a deep dive. From the corridors of Brussels to the streets of Tehran and into the psychological wiring of an entire movement. It's clear the uprising of 1404 isn't over.
It's a story that is still being written, and the ending depends a lot on who refuses to look away.
We'll be keeping a close eye on how this all plays out. Thanks for navigating these heavy waters with us today.
Thank you.
We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious.